Okay, so very quickly, this is where we're headed, and this is not the final iteration of this, but I want to discuss very quickly our next steps as EMS Access. So first of all, good question is, what is it? So this is intended to be a 1-year commitment by the board of directors and people in leadership positions. And it's a commitment by the entire organization. So it's not a commitment by one person or two people in that organization. It has to be the entire leadership. And that's the only way this is going to work, is we've all done this. We've all gone to seminars like this, and we write down 1 or 2 ideas, and we say, oh, this is great. We should bring this back into the organization. And then what happens? You have plenty of naysayers. Oh, it's too much money. Oh, it's too much effort. Oh, it's too whatever. But our direction, which is we envelop the entire organization, leadership, structure in this process, then that full commitment gets distributed around to the entire organization from top to bottom. And this is what it's going to go through, is everything that you see here. It's going to go through leadership, a lot of what we've talked about today, in operations, finances. So this is where the transparency comes in, where we want you to and need to be available to open up truthfully and with trust to our people, your finances. And it's understanding where you are and where you're going. We want to, if you don't have your vision, mission, and values, we want to help you to develop those. We want you to develop your culture. We want you to understand your SWOT analysis. We want you to understand how you do things. If you don't have any processes or procedures or SOPs at all, we want to address that. That can also include your bylaws. Anyone here have bylaws that started when the organization started, right? There's quite a few of them out there. So we want to really look at bringing your bylaws up to modern day standards, and that doesn't mean you don't have to mail out meetings with actual snail mail. And then of course we want to talk about some other things, retention, and then we want to talk about sort of how you break apart this giant elephant, how you eat it one bite at a time. And so what's going to require is some significant commitments of time and effort with a leadership coach and a business coach, an executive leader approach, to help you to really work through this. And most of this we expect to do in person. So it's not just Zoom so people can just wander off on their phones off screen. We really want you to be an active part of this. So this is just an example of where our group is heading. And if you think that your organization would be interested in this, certainly we would like to hear from you. And that's obviously for anyone who's running virtually as well. But it doesn't happen with just an individual. It has to be the entire board. So that's my little preaching on what this is going to be. And now we can go back to the show, which is still me. All right. We're not going to say anything more about the Mets. We're going back to PowerPoint. Okay. This drives me crazy. Oh, sorry. I'm carrying the mic. So I'm gonna wander. I'm a wanderer, by the way. Am I live? Ah, excellent, because I wasn't wired for sound. So I want to separate the board from operations. This is a very difficult thing because oftentimes bylaws are written where the operations people are part of the board. Well, that's really going to be the challenge. So my general position is that the board needs to work on the organization. The operations team works in the organization. And I hope that you start to understand what that means. So that means a very clear line defining roles and responsibilities, that there should be absolutely 0 board members in operations. And conversely, no operations people on the board. And even in my own organization, I know that that's going to be a struggle, but there's going to be a reason for it. And then lastly is the captain, who's very much a part of all this, but they are a non-voting member of the board. So this is how operations works. And it's up close, it's on the minutia, it's day-to-day stuff that you have to deal with. It is, not that the colors are representing particularly well, but the pinks might be your admin, some of the blues might be some of the patient care reports, some of this green might be that you have a lawnmower that you need to get serviced. Any one of these things are operations requirements. They all have to be done. Operations, administration, all of that. What the board needs to do is look at the big picture. And that is the whole thing, where it is, where it was, but more importantly, where is it going? And by the way, not that it works out pretty well, but that little scrap was like right here. That's operations. The big picture is the mission and how to fulfill that mission. So, as some of you may have seen, these are 3 basic roles of each board member. And some of this is a little redundant to what you heard, but it's duty of care, duty of loyalty, and duty of obedience. And these are standards for board members. So number 1, as Richard clearly said, that the assets are right under your umbrella. You need to know it, you need to understand it, and you need to know that those assets are being used effectively and that they are being used appropriately. So when we say that, we don't want assets to be used, personal use of the gas cards, right? That would be a problem. You want to be able to understand that, the financial side of this. You are responsible for raising money. So, and deciding how that money is going to come in. So one of the biggest things I learned when I'm running my business, finally, was that I'm the bread maker, right? If I don't bring in the business, no one else has a paycheck, they're all going to leave. So it's my job to bring in that money. And as a board, that's your job, probably one of your most important jobs, is figuring out how to raise those funds, whether it's grants, whether it's running everything that we've already talked about. And then, of course, as we talked about the mission statement, was brought up before, it is very important that you establish what that mission is, because from top to bottom, you want to make sure that everybody is fully on board with that. And then, of course, be aware of those, financial wise. Duty of loyalty. So this seems like an easy one, but you want everything that you do is that you want to place the interests of the organization above the interests, your own interests. And that's a hard ask for some people. And that is not just, oh, I'm going to grab a couple gauze. It is using, getting the VA Volunteer Ambulance Corps license plate on your vehicle so you can park, in front of a hydrant or in some area that you're not allowed. That's misuse of that asset, right? And then another important thing is, of course, conflict of interest. And annually, you should have a conflict of interest disclosure form. So if you have a vendor who happens to be part owner and part of the board, any work that they might do on behalf of the corporation needs to be very carefully vetted. So if you own an auto body shop and you want to work on the ambulances of the organization that you're a board member of, you can easily see how there might be some conflict of interest there. It still may be fine that you do it. It's okay, but you want to make sure it's fully disclosed. In that case, probably you want to have competing bids. And then the last one is duty of obedience. To understand, you got to understand the laws. You have to understand the laws, the regulations. I mean, not to such a finite level. It's always nice to have one person on the board who really knows this stuff. And when I listened to some of the number of people around here, at least certainly at lunch, I was like amazed at what everyone brought to the table. And it's clearly not possible to know it all, although maybe Jerry does. And then you have to make sure that you are in compliance. And of course, you want to make sure that you have all your bylaws, which we talked about, and all your policies, SOPs, everything in place. So it's very clear from anyone who enters that this is how you run your operation. And then of course, provide the governance. So this is a mission statement from an agency down in Florida, and I just really kind of liked it because it was very clearly spelled out. But the one I'm going to highlight right now is honesty. So we will exhibit honesty, integrity in all matters. That sounds pretty clear, right? So if that is your policy, then you need to broadcast that as part of your mission so that whatever that is, if you're on a PCR, if you're explaining honesty on your PCR, there's no question. If you didn't get a second set of vitals, you don't just start writing them in because that's dishonest. If you banged up the ambulance, which of course never happens, but if it did happen, you would be honest and truthful. My bad, because it's the worst thing that happens is that my bad is when you hit something and then the next crew goes out and it turns out that what you banged out was a tire, and now they either have a flat tire or they have a flat tire on the way to a call, or even worse with a patient. That's a problem. So you need to be able to be honest with your crew if that's part of your mission. And of course, there's something about safe psychology that allows that, but it is allowed to shift your mission, but it should be absolutely number one from you as orientation. This is our mission. These are our values. This is what we believe in. And for the same reason that you onboard them, you might offboard these people for the exact same reasons. You don't believe in our values. You're not following our values. We don't feel that you are, this is the right place for you. So the strategic plan is really, okay, I've taken this vision. What do I do with it? So the strategic plan is the how. You know, it's great to have these very lofty goals, but one of the things that I really believe in is the boots on the ground. Like, you know, there's a lot of, you know, very high level stuff that we talked about today, but for the boots on the ground, what does this mean? What does it mean for you as board members and leaders? What does it mean for the individuals who come into that organization? You want to explain to them how we're going to fulfill that mission. They want that information. They want that knowledge. They want to know, like, what is my purpose here? What is my why? So you have to bring them in. What is that driving force that says, we're amazing, don't go down the street to the other guys because of our mission? And then, yes, I did mention, like, you know, if you need to identify things like honesty and you need to explain it to them and their idea of honesty is a little different than yours, then maybe you have to tighten up what some of these things mean. But it is, in this case, what I believe is that in every interaction that that person makes, whether they're an apprentice or a probie, or they're someone who's helping to clean the ambulances, to the captain, to the chair, the board chairperson, everyone knows what that means. Crystal clear. Obviously, we talked a lot about this, the financial responsibilities, the trust, and my favorite line from him was trust but verify. But you have to start to learn how to read financial statements. And I think a lot of board members just say, oh, the treasurer's got it, I don't have to worry about it. Well, that doesn't work. It's not, as a fiduciary, you have no choice. You have to learn how to do it. There's plenty of information to know how to do it. And fortunately, with QuickBooks, it basically prints all the stuff out for you. But you're no longer allowed to say, oh, that's the treasurer's responsibility. It doesn't work. It's not allowed. You as a board member, you must know what's happening with the financials in your own corporation. And, you know, maintain to follow the accounting policies and everything else. Insurance policies, we all think, oh, we'll just read it. Well, why not check out the insurance policy? Maybe it doesn't actually reflect what you currently have. And you want to make sure, you know, I have, say you have a new piece of equipment in your base. Well, is that now covered? Because you have a certain level of policy, but now you've put in, you know, a $20,000, what do you call it, life pack. And the next thing you know, that's not actually covered because it was not listed as a very specific item with your insurance carrier. And then this is one of my major things is consider an endowment or other legal, I say legal. So don't offshore your money to the Canary Islands. But if you want to start thinking about the future, you have to start thinking about an endowment. And what that looks like is a separate fund that is built out with a series of different income producing, whatever, that could be bonds, that could be stocks, but it's not just sitting in a savings account drawing no interest. It's not sitting in a checking account drawing zero interest. You want to start to build that up. And to build up that endowment, what that does for you, of course, is that down the line, when things get bad, you're not scratching around and say, oh, but we do have an endowment, we can pull from that endowment, or the endowment is really intended to say, we're going to use this money, we're going to earmark it for ambulances, and that's where that money is going to go, so it's never touched again until we use it exactly for an ambulance. So the board makeup is really kind of a tough one for EMS. For some bizarre reason, a lot of agencies rely only on member boards. So you have to be a member of the agency or the organization prior to being a board member, or some variation that. What I am going to implore you to do, and of course this also requires bylaw changes, which are significant, is I want you to remove all of those operations people because they have enough to do. They don't need to be thinking about the future while they're still trying to deal with the day-to-day. That is your responsibility. So we want you to go out to the community and get board members who are interested in what we do. And of course, we have to tell them and we have to recruit them, and I'll get to that in a minute. But basically, the community has a wealth of skill sets. There are so many people out there that you can probably bring in. And the other thing that I really think that you want to consider is right here, where the even number versus an odd number. So if you have an 8-person board, that has to be, for something to pass, it's 5-3, right? Versus say a 9-member board where it's 5-4, if I'm doing my math right. And so you just don't want to have that one person that's sort of like reflecting this. You want to try to make that so that your decisions are really by a little bit more of a super majority, so that you understand that everybody is actually aligned with the direction that you're going. And again, extend the terms of your people, which has to be changed probably through bylaws. To have annual elections is a waste of time because there's no continuity throughout the course. If you have people elected and they understand that they're serving for 2 or 3 or even 4 years, then you can build something up. Imagine if we had in our legislature or a president, say the president gets elected every single year, nothing will get done. By establishing that continuity over multiple years, you can really start to make progress because you're going to have that mission, you have everybody on that mission, and in a month's time, when elections come, that it all dissipates. Okay, so this is sort of one of those examples of setting goals, and Michael talked a lot about 5-year goals. I suggest, because you want to look towards the future, look for a 10-year goal, or maybe a number of 10-year goals. In my business, I probably have around 16 10-year goals. And it's not so that by year 10 that I'm saying, oh, I should start working on these things, right? I'm starting today, and I look at that every quarter to make sure everything I'm doing works towards those 10-year goals. This is a very simple example, which you can read. The idea is that if you want to start the idea of building a building in 10 years, you don't start raising that money after year 10, you start raising it now. And then you start benchmarking that to make sure that you are on track to make it. So, and then you can set, if you set your 10-year goal, then your 3-year goal probably is 3 million. And then your 1-year goal is going to be maybe 1 million. But you have to start and you have to understand. And if you go to this, and then now you have to say, okay, let's go to the community and let's get that money in. The strategic part, yes, is the how. How am I going to do this? But here's the biggest problem. How do you eat an elephant? Bite by bite. You can't decide to make every decision and make everything go at once. So quarterly projects are ways of moving things forward, but not trying to say, oh my gosh, I'm going to eat the whole thing at once. So what this looks like is that, say, and I use this example, where the board agrees that they're going to make some change, they're going to do one item. So in this, begin Q1 refers to quarters. So in this case, the board agrees to submit 3 grant requests in Q2. So one person, Bob, we're going to call him, is going to add this to his list, and this is sometimes called rocks. to be completed by the end of Q1. So at each meeting, so because oftentimes most boards meet every month, Bob is going to tell the board where they are. Are they on track or are they off track? And the board is going to make him accountable for this. And then he says, so look, I'm having a real problem. 2 of the ones I have no problem with, but the 3rd one I'm having a problem. And others will step in and say, how can we help? How can we address this? How can we move this forward? So that at the end of Q1, Bob has his report, it's ready to go, it's done, and Bob's recommendation is approved, and then he moves on to another goal. So if you have 9 board members, each one picking off one little item to be addressed, 4 times a year, you could complete 36 goals, small goals, but they're goals. How many are we all completing now, these small goals? I'm gonna go with maybe 2, if you're lucky. It's not a lot, but you want to start breaking it down. And then you want to start thinking, as a board member, the future opportunities. We have to look to the future. We can't look to the past. We want to look at those strategic agreements. We want possibly to look at bulk purchasing. We want to look at how to expand our offerings. Glen Oaks, I was obviously very impressed with that, where they were able to build an ALS service, and they went through a very methodical process to do so, and that's what it is. They saw an opportunity, they went for it, they did it all by the book, and now they have an ALS system. And then also an agreement with FEMA, which was the national idea. So, and then we have threats. There are a couple threats to EMS. Obviously, a lot of them are financial, dwindling money, reimbursements, grants. We have huge problems in dwindling membership. And that's also a huge problem, of course, for our rural areas, where you might have an hour, hour and a half drive each way to your nearest regional hospital. So if that hospital closes down, now you're even in more trouble. So who has half a day to spend on a single transport? And then while you're out, who's covering your area, because now you have a second patient. So a lot of these things you really want to work through is, what are those threats? How can I address them? How can I take them on and not just wait for them? There's a big difference between a forward-leaning organization, which has everyone rowing in one direction, and a piece of driftwood, which is essentially, you are just waiting, you're just riding the currents, and I'm not sure which way it's going to go, and maybe it's going to take me this way, maybe it's going to take me that way. That's things that are coming at you. You have to take a step and say, these are the things that are going to come from me. We are going to make this decision, and we're going to move forward. So recruiting board members, always a challenge, but you want to start with the obvious. If it's a member board, you want to look for those leaders. If it's a community board, now your pot is so large, and you want to start thinking about what it is you need. If you need, it'd really be good to have an attorney in this area. My guess is you can find an attorney who might be willing to join your board, but you have to go out and ask, and you have to explain what you do. It can't just be transport, but it's like, we help your neighbors. Ah, okay, that could be good. If you're thinking about building a building, maybe you want an architect on your board. If you maybe if you want a retired ER doc, works with a hospital that you're thinking about doing a strategic plan with, look for those opportunities. Be creative, be inventive, and you'd be amazed at what you might pull out. And be clear about what your expectations are. A lot of board members say, okay, thank you for becoming a board member. That will be $10,000 a year, please. No, that would be great. But what we really see is that your legal expertise is going to be really helpful here. And this is what we want to use. You want to onboard people. I know it's a little hard to read, but you want to they want to understand what it is your mission is intended to do and how you're going to do it. No one wants to be on a sinking ship. And so after you visit with the hospitals, you want to be clear. Are you the iceberg? Are you about to hit the iceberg? Or unfortunately, have you already hit the iceberg? And they need to know what they're walking into. Because if they have as a fiduciary, as a board member, and they find out that you're a sinking ship when they didn't even know that, that might be a problem. So their responsibilities, their obligations, fiscal support, time to serve, the capacity to serve, helping to set the policy and everything else to future success. So you think, well, our board meeting is fine. So in our meetings, we discuss a whole list of things. Runs last month, new members, buildings, plumbing issues. By the way, I snaked our own toilet to great success, by the way. All this stuff, right? What are these? This goes into an operations meeting. None of this should be discussed in a board meeting, and yet it finds a way. It finds a way in. A real board meeting, this is the stuff that we want to talk about. All these things, the projects, the future opportunities, the board makeup, the financial picture, forecasting, metrics, and benchmarks. As a board, this is what we want. And conversely, we don't want our operations people coming in because they're going to say, well, that's great, but I still have to get the toilet, unplugged. No. That's your operations meeting. I'm sure you can handle it. We're moving on to different things. So in summary, split it apart. Bring in new board members from the community, change your bylaws. That's always fun. And of course, learn the responsibilities that you as board members, some of your board members here, that you can take on, and of course, learn the finances. So that's it. Thank you. If you have questions, feel free to shout them out, or if you have any. If not, we can go to a break. Silence. Yep. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Let me just hand this over to you. Over? Okay. Go for it.
So for some of the, for example, in my organization, even though we're a private organization that's collecting money directly from the communities, when we select our board, how is the board, who's selecting those board members, and how is that selection process happening? So we talked about getting them from outside the organization. Right now, it's part of the standard, I'm sure it's part of the standard election process. Along with every other member is your board of officers or your board of trustees, right? Mm-hmm. And so how are we doing that board of director selection from the shareholders within the company?
Excellent question. And there are two ways, oftentimes there are two ways that these are done. One is that the membership elects the board members, or the existing board members put forth somebody that we hope that the membership will accept. I think that generally there is one other way, which is that the board selects the board members. I'm not particularly in favor of that direction, simply because it may serve the mission, but there's also the potential for unfortunate things to happen down the line that, because of, I want to call it collusion, but when you're friends with somebody, it starts to challenge and dilute perhaps what the mission is really intended. I do like bringing the membership in to discuss this so that they understand what those roles and responsibilities are for a board member, so that they can and see what those needs are, so they can appreciate the type of person that, or people that they're trying to bring in. Nice, quiet audience. Perfect. Oh, sorry. Oh. Pointer. Yeah, no, you didn't have to. We all want coffee and cookies.
If you have a small organization that you're unable to separate the operational people from the actual board people, how would you collab that together or try to make it an effective board of directors? What you got, basically?
Okay. It's actually easy. Don't do it. You're going to have to go through your bylaws. You're going to have to go through it one by one. And it may say that we're going to adopt this bylaws about changing this structure, and we're going to implement it, or we're going to approve it now, but we're going to implement it in a year's time, so that you establish it, you understand what you're going to do, you start breaking out those things. So say, like to Michael's point, this is what we're going to do in a year's time. Let's figure out how we can do it. And there's absolutely a way. Yes, when you're a small organization, it's certainly harder. But if you pull in those community members to take over, say, half your board, then it takes 3 or 4 or 5 people who are doing both jobs, both wearing both hats, to say, okay, you're now on this side. It allows them to succeed in areas where they're diluted, right? I'm doing half of this, I'm doing half of this, and none of it's getting done. So if I can concentrate solely on this and have that, you know, laser focus of what I'm trying to do, that laser focus, I'm going to get a lot more accomplished versus just I'm forced to do everything.
So follow-up question, what happens after that year process, that year time, if you don't find anyone that can fulfill the shoes of that?
Let's look at, you see, this is a problem that we have where people, it was kind of like COVID, where, oh, we can't do this because of COVID. We can't do this because of COVID. The answer is, oh, we're doing it. It's going forward. And this is why. This is why we're doing this, because we feel this, and you're going to have to get people on board. You're going to have to do that convincing. And as one of the leaders, you're going to have to make the tough decisions about this. I'm sorry, this is what we're doing. This is where we're going. It's not an easy process, but if you know that the end result, the finish line is this, and you get everybody up to the why we're doing this, I feel confident, and you have a good guide, sorry, to help you. I feel confident that this can be accomplished. Okay, take that.
I think you raised several good points. I like the fact that you want to keep the membership involved. I think that keeps them engaged and feeling part of the process. Looking around the state, as I have the opportunity to do, the most problematic organizations are the ones where the majority of the board members are also the operations people. Most successful organizations around the state, most of them do have operational people on the board, but the majority of the board is not operational people. And they have a good section of professionals from the community also on the board. That seems to be a comfortable formula for a lot of volunteer organizations. And they're very clear about separating the operations office and its duties from the board's responsibility. So that's at least the first good step to take to get people weaned into the process of, you know, separating those duties. But, you know, where it's mostly all the operational people, those seem to be the organizations that have just the most problems, because they're always focusing. You know, there was a great little book that was published by one of the foundations some years ago, Policy versus Paperclips. And you probably are somewhat familiar with it. It's, you know, when you're worried about the copy machine you're buying instead of the funding that's going to come in to support the whole organization, that's not what the board should be doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think you nailed it. Is when the organization is mired in the day-to-day, or those people, nothing. It's kind of like this. If you're let's just say you're an electrician, and you have 2 problems ahead of you. One is an electrical issue. The other one happens to be a plumbing issue. Well, all right. I'm going to take care of this because it's easy and understood, and I know how to do it. I can do this paperwork because I know it. I don't know how to market. I don't know how to go after donors. I don't know what that process looks like. And so I'm going to avoid the plumbing, and I'm just going to concentrate on this electrical. Oh, and by the way, maybe while I'm doing electrical, I'm going to work on this fan. Again, you still have this huge leak that's taking place, but it's not comfortable for you. So you're just going to keep doing other things that you know that keep you in your comfort zone. I know it's not easy, but you have to get out of the comfort zone. You have to start thinking about this as a corporation that needs money to come in. And that doesn't happen when you are thinking about, you know, the tire issues that you might have. Oh, audience. No, I think I got it. What are your suggestions for issues where board members inhibit operational issues? Excellent. Understanding that it be best they be completely separate entities. All right, I think minus the slight grammatical errors. So yeah, okay. So we have the exact same problem, right? So where one side, where the operations gets into the board says, gets into the operations and says, oh, well, this is where the board has to set and record the bylaws SOPs and make it crystal clear. So when it comes to operations and something happens, the board is like, not our problem. We've put this policy in place. Operations, you execute. That is your job to execute. And we've created this policy and procedure so you can follow exactly step by step to resolve that item, and who you come up to, there's a chain of command to address that. So you have accountability all the way through, but there's still a glass pane that separates these people from saying, oh no, I know what this says, but I'm telling you to do it this way, and I can do that because I'm a board member. That doesn't work. On the other side, you have to be like, I appreciate your comments. Thank you. Thank you. But this is what it says. I'm moving forward with this. If you have a problem with it, change your policies and procedures.
How transparent should that glass be on both sides?
The captain of the organization. So you have the board and then the captain who leads operations. That is the pathway. That is, over the glass. That's who brings things. So if it really has to rise up to the level of captain, and my feeling is it probably doesn't for 90% of the things that happens, that is when that communication can happen. But it can't happen with me as a board member and you as either a lieutenant or even worse, you as just a little, as an apprentice. You need to have that very clear. And you might need to put on a different hat. And that's fine because I'm a driver possibly, and I have that. But as a board member, this is my function. This is my lane. This is where I'm headed.
I think a reasonable example is a board of fire commissioners versus the fire chief. They pretty much understand the different roles. The board of fire commissioners would never tell the chief how to run an operation, right? That would never happen because the guy in the white hat who's the chief would tell him, go where to stick it. That doesn't mean they don't have an influence over policy, but I think there's a better separation there than we have in EMS a lot of times. So, and I wish we'd stop calling the leader of an EMS organization a captain. I wish that we'd start calling them a chief or a director of operations. I think that's also in terms of conveying respect and responsibility that they have. That's the title they should have: director of operations or chief of operations or something like that. Let's get away from calling them a captain.
From being from two organizations, the first time I ever heard captain was when I was in Ridgewood. So I didn't understand before I actually started running for anything at Ridgewood what was the difference between captain and president. Okay, but now I do know, and I like it. I don't like the word captain either. I'll be honest with you. I don't think so. I think, and I totally agree that the board needs to be completely separated from operations. It has to be. That's the only way it's going to work.
Right. Well, and then one of the great things about EMS is that across this country, the chief or captain is called like 4 other things in other agencies. So there is no actual uniform policy for how these things are dictated. So I look at it as basically, if you're looking from the business model, they're a COO, right? That's what they are. They are chief operations officers. Their job is and I have a COO who's amazing, but like, this is what I want to do. This is where we're going to go. She's like, okay, I'm going to figure this out. That's it. And we'll have a conversation back and forth, like maybe budgets or other things, but that's it. Like, I have my marching orders. This is what I'm going to go. This is the mission. I'm going to spread the word. So but that's the only way this works. As soon as you have that massaging or that dilution, it's from that point where you're heading exactly where EMS is right now, going in a spiral downhill, right? I mean, I think a lot of you can argue that. So you can't keep hammering the same nail into a piece of wood. You have to start rethinking how things run. And if you're saying, oh, but this is the way we've always done it, where is that going to lead you? It's going to keep leading down. And so we have to stop this. We have to stop the hemorrhaging, We have to really reevaluate how we do things, and it has to start at the board and leadership level. All right, I'm going to take this to be the last question. This is the toughest. What educational training tracks that help craft such competencies? None. Mic drop. I don't, some of you, may have gone to college for certain things. Whether that you may become a doctor or a PA, or maybe you became an accountant or an attorney, or you learn a certain practice. What is the one thing that you didn't learn in all of your courses? How to run the business of the area that you've decided to go into, right? None of us have learned that. We've learned, my business is lighting design. I mean, good heavens. But did I ever learn how to run a business from that, from my graduate school? Of course not, none of it. So this is why EMS access exists. This is exactly the reason. So that for volunteer EMS agencies, that we can become your resource for exactly these things. Challenges in leadership, understanding the roles and responsibilities. We have an ideal organizational chart, which is very clear, right down the middle, how things are separated. And it's not pleasant, and there can be people who would be upset because, well, I used to do this and now I do this. Okay, but that's okay, because you have a very clear role, and we've established this so that you can do your job. We are priming you for success this way. That's the whole point. So there is no management class. This is where we're going. This is why we want to take you all with us, so that that EMS as a giant community, not just New York City, not just New York State, but our entire country can benefit from those best practices that we all learn from each other. So with that, a break.